Hello, you're on the Reddit Confessions channel. The night I left, it wasn't because of a fight, or a big screaming match, or even an argument. It was because of silence. A silence so heavy it made the air in our house feel thick, like breathing through wet cloth. She was standing in the kitchen with the fridge door open, staring at nothing. The cold air fogged up the glasses on the top shelf, and yet she didn't move. I leaned against the doorway, watching her, and for a second, I thought maybe she'd say something, anything. Instead, she shut the fridge, walked right past me like I wasn't there, and brushed her sleeve against my arm in a way that felt less like contact and more like avoidance. Something inside me sank. I wanted to reach for her, to make her see me, but I knew what would happen if I tried. That one word she'd used before, "don't," was already in my head, ready to land before I even touched her. So, I didn't. I just stood there, letting her disappear into the bedroom, listening to the sound of drawers opening and closing. The soft thud of her feet across the carpet. And then, nothing again. That's when I realized how invisible I'd become. Not in a sudden way, but in the slow erosion kind of way, like a photograph left in the sun too long, fading until the image is barely there. 5 minutes later, I was in the garage, the duffel bag in my hand, the car keys cold against my palm. No note, no text, no goodbye. The garage door rattled open, and the sound seemed louder than it should have been, like the universe was trying to mark the moment. By the time I hit the highway, my phone was already lighting up with her calls. I didn't answer. I couldn't. I just drove into the dark, not realizing that this quiet exit, this silent vanishing, would be the exact thing to finally break her. And what came next would leave me questioning if I'd ever truly known the woman I'd married. I didn't plan on stopping, but after nearly 2 hours of driving, my hands started shaking on the steering wheel. Not from fear, but from the weight of what I'd just done. The yellow glow of an old roadside diner caught my eye, and I pulled in, figuring a cup of bad coffee was better than sitting alone in some dark motel room with my thoughts screaming at me. Inside, it was nearly empty, just a tired-looking waitress wiping down a counter and a man in a baseball cap hunched over a plate of pancakes like they were his last meal. I slid into a booth in the far corner, ordered coffee, and stared out the window at the dark stretch of road I'd just come from. I kept checking my phone on the table, face down but buzzing every few minutes. The number of missed calls was climbing so fast it was almost surreal. 23. 27. 31. The coffee came, and I wrapped my hands around the mug, hoping the heat would steady me. That's when the first voicemail alert popped up. I told myself I wouldn't listen, but curiosity has a way of chewing through resolve. I pressed play. Her voice was shaky but restrained. "Leonard, I don't know what's going on. Please just come home." There was a pause, then a click. The second message was shorter. "Just breathing." No words, but the kind of breathing you hear when someone's pacing, phone pressed too tight against their ear. By the third one, her composure was cracking. "I can't do this right now. I can't, just answer me, please." And then, something strange, the sound of her whispering to someone else in the room. A man's voice. Too low to make out, but it was there. I froze. My thumb hovered over the replay button, but I didn't press it. Instead, I just sat there, the clink of dishes in the kitchen fading into background noise while my brain tried to catch up. Who was she talking to? Why did it sound like she wasn't alone in our house, barely an hour after I left? The waitress came by to refill my coffee, and I nodded without really seeing her. My chest felt tight, like the air was suddenly too thick again. The urge to go back, to demand answers, clawed at me, but I knew that if I did, I'd walk straight into something I couldn't unsee. I picked up my phone and scrolled to the call list again. 42 missed calls now. 6 voicemails. Each one probably pulling me closer to the truth. But I wasn't ready. Not yet. Because deep down, I had a feeling that whatever was waiting in those messages wasn't going to be an explanation, it was going to be a confession. The sixth voicemail sat there on my phone like a loaded gun, silent but threatening. I sat in that booth long after my coffee had gone cold, the smell of burnt toast from the kitchen clinging to the air. Every so often, my thumb would hover over the play button, but I'd pull it back like I was afraid the phone might burn me. When I finally worked up the nerve, I slipped my earbuds in, hunched forward like I was about to hear state secrets, and pressed play. At first, it was just the sound of her crying. Not loud, but uneven, the kind that comes from someone trying to hold themselves together and failing. Then, through the muffled sobs, her voice, "I didn't mean for it to be like this, please, just let me explain before you," and then she stopped mid-sentence. The next thing I heard was a man's voice, clear this time, not the barely there murmur from before. "He's not coming back, Erin. You know that." My stomach turned so hard it felt like the booth was tilting. The way he said it, calm, almost reassuring. Not a stranger. Not some random voice. This was someone comfortable in my home, speaking like he had the right to be there, like he'd been there before. I yanked the earbuds out and let the phone clatter on the table, earning a glance from the man in the baseball cap at the counter. I didn't care. My mind was stuck on the way she hadn't argued with him, hadn't told him to leave. The logical part of me, the part that still thought like a rational adult, tried to piece it together. Maybe it was her brother. Maybe a friend from work. Maybe, but then I remembered something, Erin doesn't have a brother. She doesn't bring friends home without telling me. And she's been working late a lot these past few months. I left the diner without paying for my refill, climbing into my car and gripping the steering wheel so tightly my knuckles whitened. I didn't start the engine right away. Instead, I stared at my own reflection in the rearview mirror. I looked hollow. Like someone who had just been told their entire life might have been a long, slow joke. Finally, I pulled onto the road, not back toward home, but toward the one place I knew I could sit unnoticed, the 24-hour laundromat across town. I parked where I could see the main road, killed the engine, and sat in the dark, the glow of the vending machine inside spilling out onto the pavement. The phone was still in my lap, heavy and accusing. I scrolled through the older voicemails, the earlier ones from that night. The first two were her pretending she didn't know why I left. The middle ones were her starting to lose her grip. But that last one, that one told me everything I needed to know. She wasn't calling to beg me back out of love. She was calling because she just realized she couldn't control the outcome anymore. And whoever that man was, he was part of the reason she'd refused my touch in the first place. I sat there until dawn, watching the road, waiting for the moment I'd decide whether to confront her, or disappear so completely she'd never get the chance to explain anything at all. The laundromat's fluorescent lights hummed through the glass, their harsh white glow making everything outside look washed out and unreal. I sat there in the driver's seat, watching the occasional early morning customer shuffle in with a basket of clothes, and wondering how they could exist in such an ordinary way while my entire life was unraveling in my hands. My phone sat on the passenger seat, screen dark now, but every time I looked at it, I could almost hear his voice again, "He's not coming back, Erin. You know that." It had been less than 12 hours since I walked out, yet those words already felt carved into me. I told myself not to read into it too much, that maybe I'd misheard. But that lie didn't last long, because there was something in his tone that didn't belong to strangers or coworkers or anyone who wasn't deeply entangled in her life. It was the kind of voice you use when you've been close to someone in ways that don't need explaining. The kind of voice I used to have with her before she started flinching from my touch. And if I'm honest, part of me had already known. You don't just wake up one day and stop wanting your partner to be near you. Something had been replacing me, piece by piece, until there was no space left for me at all. The sky outside was shifting from black to a cold gray when I finally picked up the phone again. My thumb hovered over her name in the call list. I thought about calling, not to reconcile, that was gone, but to catch her off guard, to hear whatever panic was simmering under her voice. But I didn't press it. Instead, I opened my messages. There was a string of texts from her, growing more frantic the later the night had gone on. Please call me. Where are you? I'm sorry. And then the last one, sent at 3:27 a.m., I need to explain before you do something stupid. Something stupid. That's what she thought I was capable of. After years of bending over backward to keep her happy, of shrinking myself down so small she could have all the space she wanted, I was capable of something stupid, in her eyes. That text said more than any voicemail. It told me she wasn't worried about me, she was worried about herself, about losing control of whatever double life she'd been running. I leaned back in the seat, staring at the ceiling of the car, and let the ugly reality settle in. If I went back, I'd walk into a conversation she'd choreographed to make herself the victim. She'd cry, she'd twist things, she'd find a way to make my leaving the problem instead of why I left. And worse? I might fall for it. That was the part that scared me the most, that even now, with her betrayal humming like a warning siren in my head, I still wanted her to look at me the way she used to. By the time the sun was fully up, the city was waking around me, but I hadn't moved. My coffee from the diner was still sitting in the cup holder, cold and untouched. I told myself I'd drive somewhere far, maybe a few states away, vanish into a place where she couldn't reach me. But the truth was, I wasn't ready to disappear completely. Not until I knew exactly who that man was, and how long he'd been standing in the space where I should have been. I started the engine, the sound breaking the quiet like a crack of thunder, and turned the car toward the one person I thought might know the truth, someone who had nothing to gain from lying to me. I didn't know yet if I was looking for confirmation, or for an excuse not to believe what I already knew. I drove without music, without a podcast, without anything to drown out the thoughts that kept looping in my head. Every mile felt heavier, like the road itself was pressing me toward a truth I didn't want but couldn't stop chasing. My destination wasn't her work, or our house, or anywhere obvious. I was heading to Lydia's place, Aaron's oldest friend. The two of them had known each other since high school, and while they'd grown apart in recent years, Lydia had never been shy about telling me when Aaron was acting selfish. If anyone had seen something, or heard something, it would be her. Lydia lived in a cramped little apartment over a bakery, the smell of bread and cinnamon hitting me before I even parked. I climbed the narrow stairwell, my hand resting on the railing that felt slick from years of varnish and neglect. When she opened the door, she looked surprised, and not in the polite "oh, what a nice surprise" way. It was the kind of surprise that said she already knew I wouldn't be coming to her unless something was seriously wrong. "Leonard?" She started, but I cut her off, because I didn't have the strength for small talk. "Who's the guy?" My voice cracked on the last word, and I hated that it did. I wanted to sound sharp, in control, but it came out shaky and tired, like I'd already lost. She blinked, her brow furrowing. "What guy?" "The one in my house last night. The one who told her I wasn't coming back." I watched her face carefully, the way you watch a poker player for the smallest tell. And there it was, a flicker. Her eyes darted away for half a second before locking back onto mine. "Leonard, I think you should talk to Aaron," she said, but her voice didn't match the words. It was too careful, like she was choosing each one for how little it revealed. I stepped further into her apartment, the floorboards creaking under my weight. "No. You're going to tell me. Right now." She let out a slow breath, crossing her arms. "Look, it's not what you think." I laughed, an ugly, hollow laugh that sounded foreign even to me. Every time someone says that, it's exactly what I think. For a moment, it felt like she might just shut down and refuse to answer, but then her eyes softened, and her voice dropped. "Leonard, he's not new. He's been around for a while." I told her she was making a mistake, but she kept saying you wouldn't notice. That you were too wrapped up in your own head to see what was happening right in front of you. Those words hit harder than I expected. Too wrapped up in my own head. Was that how she justified it? That I somehow deserved to be replaced because I was the kind of man who noticed when my wife flinched from my touch. I leaned against the wall, my legs suddenly weak. Who is he? Lydia hesitated. You're not going to like the answer. I already don't like anything about this, I said. She looked at me with a kind of pity I didn't want. It's someone you know. The room tilted a little, and my ears rang. Of course it was. These things always were. My mind started cycling through every man in our lives, from neighbors to coworkers to people I hadn't thought about in years. The list was too long, and every name made my stomach turn. I left Lydia's without saying goodbye, my pulse pounding in my ears. Driving away, the streets felt narrower, the light harsher, and my own thoughts sharper than they'd been in days. She had let someone I knew step into my life, into my house, into her, and then looked me in the eye and acted like nothing had changed. That was the moment I knew I couldn't just vanish quietly anymore. I needed the truth spelled out in her voice, even if it destroyed whatever was left of me. By the time I pulled up to our street, the morning had already burned into afternoon, and the sunlight had that hard, unforgiving glare that makes everything look sharper, more exposed. I parked a few houses down, partly to keep her from hearing the car, partly because I needed those extra steps to steady myself before I walked through the door. Every crack in the sidewalk, every rustle of wind in the trees felt louder than it should have, like the world was holding its breath. I didn't have a plan. No script, no rehearsed speech. Just the raw, gnawing need to look her in the eye and force her to say his name. When I reached the house, I noticed the blinds in the living room were tilted just enough for someone inside to peek out. My stomach tightened. Was she expecting me? Or was it him, still here in the middle of the day, standing in my space like it was his? I didn't knock. I used my own key, the one she probably didn't think I'd dare use again, and stepped inside. The air felt different, not the stale, cold air of a house left alone overnight, but warmer, lived in. There was the faint smell of her perfume mixed with something else I couldn't place right away. Then I heard it, movement upstairs, slow but deliberate, like someone walking carefully to avoid being heard. I closed the door behind me and stayed still, letting the sound guide me. She appeared at the top of the stairs, wearing the same sweater she'd had on the night I left, her hair pulled back in a messy knot. For a second, she froze, and in that moment, I saw something I hadn't seen in months, fear. Not sadness, not guilt, but the kind of fear that comes when someone's been caught mid-lie and hasn't had time to decide which version of the truth to tell. Leonard, you can't just come in here, she said, her voice low but tight. I ignored that. Who is he? Her lips pressed together, and she shook her head like she didn't understand the question. What are you talking about? Don't, I said, and my voice surprised me. It wasn't loud, but it was sharper than I intended, the kind of sharpness that cuts before the other person even feels it. I heard him. On the voicemail. He said I wasn't coming back. He was in this house, Erin. Who is he? She glanced over her shoulder, just for a fraction of a second, and I knew. Whether he was still here or not, that look gave him away more than a name ever could. Leonard, you're blowing this out of proportion, she started, moving down a step, her tone shifting into that rehearsed calm she always used when she wanted to make me doubt myself. You've been acting paranoid for months. You walk out without a word, you disappear all night, and now you come back accusing me of. Stop, I said, cutting her off again. My hands were shaking, but I kept my eyes on hers. Lydia told me he's not new. She told me you've been letting him replace me for a while. So if you're going to lie, at least don't waste my time pretending I'm crazy. Her face hardened, all traces of fear gone, replaced by something colder. You shouldn't have gone to Lydia, she said quietly, almost like it was a threat. And that's when it hit me, she wasn't afraid of losing me. She was afraid of losing control over the story she'd built. From upstairs, a floorboard creaked. The sound was small, but it exploded in my head like a gunshot. I stepped toward the stairs, but she moved quickly, blocking my way, her hands out like she was keeping me from walking into traffic. "Don't do this, Leonard," she said, her voice dropping into something between a plea and a warning. "You're not going to like what you find." But she was wrong. At that point, it didn't matter if I liked it or not. I'd already decided, I was going to find out, and I was going to make her say his name while looking right at me. I stood there at the base of the stairs, my heart pounding so loudly I could barely hear her voice anymore. All I could focus on was the sound of that single creak above us. It wasn't just the noise, it was what it meant. Someone was still here, in my house, in the space I had paid for, in the life I had built, and Erin was guarding that secret like it was worth more than our entire marriage. I didn't push past her yet. I wanted to see if she'd fold under the pressure. "Move," I said, my voice flat. She didn't. Her eyes locked on mine, cold and challenging, like this was a game of endurance and whoever blinked first would lose. That's when it clicked, she thought I'd back down. She thought I'd turn around, leave again, and she could spin this into some sob story about her unstable husband. That's how she'd always won before, by making me doubt my own reason. I took one slow step toward her. "You're going to tell me who he is, or I'm going to find out myself. Either way, I'm getting an answer today." Her lips pressed tighter, and for a moment, I saw something flash across her face, guilt, maybe, or fear, but it vanished just as quickly. The floor above us groaned again. This time, I didn't wait. I stepped to the side, brushing past her shoulder. She grabbed my arm, her fingers digging in hard, and hissed, "Leonard, stop." But her grip wasn't strong enough to hold me. I climbed the stairs two at a time, my chest tight, my mind already bracing for whatever I was about to see. At the top of the landing, the hallway stretched ahead. Our bedroom door was halfway open. From inside, I could hear the faintest rustle, like someone shifting their weight on the floor. I pushed the door all the way open. And there he was. He wasn't some stranger. He wasn't a coworker I'd never met. He wasn't a faceless figure that could be explained away. He was Matt, my neighbor, the guy who had borrowed my tools last month and stood in my driveway talking to me about the weather for 20 minutes. He looked up at me, not ashamed, not panicked, just annoyed. Like I'd interrupted something important. Erin was right behind me, her voice suddenly sweet, almost desperate. "Leonard, it's not what it looks like," but I couldn't stop staring at Matt, standing there in his socks like he owned the place. He didn't flinch, didn't scramble for an excuse. Instead, he just said, "Guess you came back sooner than I thought." That one sentence hit harder than anything Erin had said. Because it wasn't just casual arrogance, it was possession. He'd been in my house enough to be comfortable here. Comfortable with her. Comfortable enough to assume I wouldn't be returning. And that told me everything I needed to know. Erin stepped in front of me again, blocking my view, her hands on my chest now. "Leonard, just listen to me." But the truth was, there was nothing left to listen to. All the missed calls, the voicemails, the guarded looks, they weren't about saving us. They were about keeping me from walking into this moment. And now that I had, there was no version of the story she could tell that would erase what I'd seen. Matt didn't say another word. He didn't have to. The damage was already done. For a few seconds, the room felt like it was caving in on itself. Erin's voice kept trying to push its way through, her hands gripping my arms, her words spilling out fast, excuses, denials, half-truths. But I wasn't really hearing her anymore. My eyes drifted past her to the window, where the sunlight cut through the curtains in soft golden stripes. And somewhere in that stillness, it hit me, this wasn't the end of my life. It was the end of a chapter one should have closed a long time ago. I stepped back, brushing her hands off me, and my voice came out calmer than I expected. "You don't have to explain. I get it now." That seemed to throw her off more than if I'd yelled. I turned, walked out of the room, and made my way down the stairs. Each step felt lighter, like I was walking out from under something heavy I'd been carrying for years without realizing it. Outside, the air was warm and smelled faintly of freshly cut grass from somewhere down the street. I got in my car, started the engine, and didn't look back. No slamming doors, no dramatic speeches, just a quiet, final leaving. The kind that leaves no room for second guesses. I drove to the coast that afternoon, finding a small cafe overlooking the water. I ordered a coffee, sat at a table by the window, and watched the waves roll in. For the first time in months, maybe years, I felt like I could breathe. The sting was still there, sure, but so was something else, relief. Relief that I didn't have to fight for space in my own life anymore. Relief that I could decide, from this point forward, what I let in and what I shut out. I knew I'd be okay. Not instantly, not perfectly, but in my own time. And as the sun dipped lower over the water, I realized that walking away wasn't just an ending, it was the start of something I'd forgotten I could have, peace. Thank you for listening to my story here on Reddit Confessions. Now I want to hear from you. Have you ever had a moment in your life where leaving turned out to be the best decision you ever made? Share it in the comments, I'd love to read your experiences.